There's a 10-minute time limit on this presentation. Please, all presenters, please state your name, first and last, clearly for the record. Any persons affiliated with the project should speak during this time. That includes owners, developers, designers, and consultants. The board can ask questions of the applicant at any time, but by custom, we ask questions on the heels of the applicant's presentation. Those board questions will be followed by a period of public comment. Again, if you are speaking during this time, please clearly state your first and last name for the record. Public comment will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. After we hear from city staff, the applicant will have the opportunity to respond or clarify anything that was raised during public comment or during the city staff recommendations. This time will be limited to 5 minutes. And again, please respond only to any comments raised by the public or staff and clarify. After the applicant has a period of time to respond, this will be followed by board discussion and a vote. The following items have been withdrawn or deferred. Item number 5, 49 South Battery. Item number 7, 10 South Atchison Wharf. And item number 8, 1108 King Street. Please turn off your cell phones and other devices if you are speaking and have your mic on during this meeting. And please limit your comments to architecture only. That is the purview of this board. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, livability concerns, those are not within our purview and they cannot be voiced here. Now I'll let Kim do some virtual meeting protocol.
Thank you, Lindsay. Staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board members or staff, will only be given capabilities to speak when they're called upon during the public comment period. Chat and the Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. For the public comment portion, the applicants and all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you'll need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. For the board members will be called on by the chairperson for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if he has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, he or she will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into an executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they're ready to return to the regular meeting. Results and staff comments will be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. These proceedings are being recorded and broadcasted to the City of Charleston's YouTube channel.
Thank you, Kim. We'll move to agenda item number 1, 974 Ashley Avenue. Kim?
Thank you. 974 Ashley Avenue is requesting final approval for a complete demolition of the building. The property is in Wagner Terrace, constructed in 1935 and in the Historic Materials Review District. Familiarize yourself with the property. Here it is, just south of San Souci and on the east side of the street. This is an image of it from the street. Different angle. And here are the Sanborn maps from 1944 and 1955. And if Mr. Plyler is with us, Mr. Plyler, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Mr. Plyler, you are on mute.
Hello?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Yes, I'm requesting to remove the structure in order to build a new home. This structure is very difficult to use. I have a tenant who lives there. My nephew lived in it when we did some rehab work on it a few years ago when he was at med school. And when we get the heavy rains of 1.5 inches or so of rain, we get water on the first floor. My tenant runs a dehumidifier in the place all the time. We have to keep a wet vac there to vacuum the water off the floor when it rains heavy. We trenched a ditch around the house to the back of the lot to try to control the water problem. The stairwell is so narrow, only one person can go up and down at one time. The ceiling height on the first floor, I'm 6'1", and under the header beam in the room on the first floor, my head just about touches the top. The kitchen is minuscule. It only has a sink and a tiny cabinet and one about 12-inch high wall cabinet, and then a stove and a microwave. There are no built-in closets in the house, downstairs or upstairs. There's a coat rod that runs along the wall for the bedroom upstairs. The ceiling heights are low on the side walls of the dwelling and doesn't provide very much access for building a closet or whatever. It's just that we could not add central heating and air conditioning to the place. When we worked on it a few years ago, we have to have window air. The only heat in the unit is the gas wall furnace that we attached on the wall downstairs to try to heat the place. It's just that it's so old, and the front section is the only old section. The rear bedroom part was added some years later, and that bedroom is very small, maybe 10 by 10. The whole structure together is only 600 and some square feet. I'd like to build a new home in the characteristic of the neighborhood and so on that would be accommodating and look a world better in compliance with what the neighborhood is today. This place was built as the front cottage that you're seeing there, where the water heater is on outside the house. That was the original size of the dwelling. The width of that and then across the front was all that was there. That's the only thing that's old, and it's very difficult to use. I would request to tear it down so I can build a new home, and I have a contractor that I'm hiring to contract a new house. And of course, we would apply through permits and all that. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Plyler. Do you have any questions from board members?
I don't. It's just that the Wagner Terrace homeowners group asked me to join them on Monday in a meeting. And after some discussion, the neighbors were in agreement that they felt that removing it would not be an objection to them. And I appreciated that discussion and so on. And I'm glad that they recommended that I could remove it.
Thank you, Mr. Plyler. My fellow board members, do you all have any questions for Mr. Plyler?
Glenn Gardner, I have one for Mr. Plyler, if that's okay. I guess my main question, it really kind of follows a little bit of a comment, but in my recognizing that the architectural value of this building is a bit limited and being a simple structure, have you considered using the old part of this building? We know that not all of it is historic, but if you considered working the old part of the building into a design for a new structure?
No, I haven't, because when we did the work on the unit of in 2012, the city inspectors at that time assured me, you will never get a permit to rehab this or add to it or make it any kind of way a better structure. the first floor level is below grade, and that's the main problem with the structure. There's no way to redeem the ceiling height in the building. The foundation wall, skirt wall, is about 2.5 feet high. That's on the side, say beneath the wall that we're seeing there, and it's concrete. And then above that is 2x4s that comes up to make up the ceiling height that's there. There's no way to raise the structure to keep it from flooding in the future. The survey on the lot that you saw pictured at first, the level at the sidewalk is 12.1 feet above sea level. And so that illustrates how low the land is. And the difficulty I have there is really makes it impossible to do. And of course, a new structure is going to have to be, I think, about 3 feet off the ground, crawl space.
Do we have any other board comment, board questions?
I don't have any other questions.
We'll move on to public comment. Okay, Kim, I see a position statement from Preservation Society. Do we have Aaron or Annie Catherine here?
The Preservation Society wishes to have their thoughts read into the record.
Okay. A letter from the Preservation Society of Charleston, position statement to the Board of Architectural Review, small, for 974 Ashley Avenue. Dear board members, the Preservation Society has reviewed this application and observed the building on site. And while there have been insensitive additions to the structure, we feel it retains considerable integrity of form and material. We would not be opposed to potential demolition of later additions, but are opposed to this request for wholesale demolition. The Preservation Society would encourage the applicant to think creatively about how to rehabilitate and incorporate this former accessory building as part of redevelopment of the property. Thank you for considering our position in this matter. Sincerely, Aaron Minigan, Director of Historic Preservation. We also have an email from Amanda Gursky dated April 22nd, 2021. Hello, Kim. Excuse me. That was just an email sending the letter, and now I will read the letter. This is a letter from the Wagner Terrace Neighborhood Association. Dear members of the Board of Architectural Review, the Wagner Terrace Neighborhood Association has been presented with a request to completely demolish the structures at 974 Ashley Avenue. While the vote was not unanimous, neighbors generally agreed these structures are not of any architectural merit and do not need to be preserved as part of the street's character. Sincerely, the Wagner Terrace Neighborhood Association. And I believe that is it for public comment, at least in the letters and position statements for 974 Ashley Avenue. Kim, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We do. We have April Wood from Historic Charleston Foundation. April, you have the floor.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for complete demolition of the building at 974 Ashley Avenue. This is a historic accessory structure that we understand once was a garage, constructed in 1935 and contributes to the historic character of the neighborhood. The historic portions of the structure are intact, retain character, and are readily apparent. We respectfully recommend denial of this application for complete demolition of the building at 974 Ashley Avenue, but we would be in support of selective demolition of the building, including the removal of the insensitive additions that obscure the historic character of the structure. We suggest that many of the livability problems mentioned in the presentation would be addressed by returning the structure into its original use as a garage with a new house in the front, potentially relocating the structure further to the back of the lot to make room for the new house. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Kim,
We also have, sorry, Lindsay, we also have Kevin Aberly. Kevin, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Perfect. Well, So my name is Kevin Eberly. I live at 367 President Street. And I just, I guess, would echo the same thoughts that April just expressed. If the building is simple, it's only simple because it was a dependency, if you will, for the house next door. It was never supposed to be anything fancy. It's true to its form. Detached garages were the character of the neighborhood. And in fact, they were marketed because you could have a detached garage behind your house. And it just seems like it would be a shame to lose the building when it seems to have a lot of potential for reuse. And I guess it would be odd that in a day and age when so many homeowners are clamoring for a small building like that behind the main house to demolish it to build a new house. So just, I would also be okay with removing some of the portion on the back, the newer portion of it, but would hate to see the whole thing come down.
Thank you, Kevin. Kim, is that it for public comment?
That is, yep, thank you. There's some interior shots that the applicant didn't go through.
And we can move on to city staff comments and recommendations.
Thank you. While the building is historic, it's not a building that has a lot of architectural merit. This is not one of Wagner Terrace's typical 20th century garage vernacular that adds an incredible amount of character to the streetscape. The historic elements remaining are the siding and the beadboard sheathing under the eaves. If it was once a garage, the siding has been added since then. And the novelty siding appears to be of the same vintage on the front, north, and south. So the siding is likely not original and has been altered when the garage was converted into a dwelling. And lastly, the applicant is demolishing the building to reknit the streetscape and construct a primary residence at the street, which was the original intent for these lots. So the staff's recommending final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Plyler, did you want to respond to anything raised during public comment or in the city staff comments?
Yes, I would like to speak to the remark concerning moving the structure to the rear of the lot. Since the structure does not have integrity of the siding, framing, and so on down to the ground, it has concrete lower walls, concrete floor. It makes it impossible to take that front section and move it to the rear of the lot. I would be moving more or less half of the first floor walls and the superstructure above it, which is a bedroom and a bathroom, moving it to the back of the lot and then rebuilding a third of the lower structure, the concrete floor and the lower walls back up again to support what's above it. I do some carpentry and I'm licensed under the state, not as a general contractor, but as a handyman. And I've worked on houses and so on. And I once owned a home on 6 Franklin Street that I owned for 30 years. There's just no redeeming quality to try to move the structure to the rear of the lot. The young lady who spoke concerning losing the structure because of the historic value of that older part is a good comment. If there were some way to keep this little structure there and you allow me to build a new home in the front, I'd be glad to try and rehab this into something that could be usable. I don't know what it would be, unless it would be like a tiny workshop or something behind the main house. But I just find that has a lot of problems trying to figure out how I would do something to make it of value.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, let's move on to board discussion and a vote on this matter.
Okay, this is Julia, and I'm pretty much aligned with staff on this. It's kind of borderline for me, but I feel like it doesn't really have a lot to tell us about our city's history, this particular structure, and it's an aberration in that it was joined with its primary residence, which is now separated from it by a property line. It's distinct property, which calls for a house toward the street. So in my mind, I just don't see a compelling reason to kind of handicap the property by preserving what's left of it.
This is Bill. I would say that I also agree with staff's comments and recommendation. Yeah, it does appear that the building has been altered probably a number of times in its life, to the point where it's only obvious to discern that one addition area. But I believe staff's suspicion about the siding is probably correct, and it appears there have been other alterations, potentially even structural alterations to the building over time. So, plus the form is not typical of a garage form, which I do believe does have historic value and merit if indeed it was one of those original garage forms. And also, I do believe potential construction of a new home to establish the rhythm of the neighborhood is a plus as well.
Omar, you're on mute.
Sorry, I said I don't have anything to add. I am, I think, reluctantly in agreement with staff. It would be nice to preserve these small buildings when they have significant value, but I think the possibility of successfully relocating this building on the lot and reusing it is probably not terribly practical. So I am reluctantly in agreement with staff.
Glenn Gardner, I'll admit that
Glenn, you're
I
breaking up.
struggled with it a bit because I'm sorry, if I don't have a good connection, I'll just have to pull out of the meeting.
We can hear you now.
Yeah, I'll just, okay. If my connection fails, I'll just have to pull out of the meeting. But I was attempting to say that I lament the fact that the board doesn't have any purview over the scale and the mass of what goes back on the site. But I hope that the applicant is thoughtful as to being cohesive with the streetscape. And I do think there is a world in which you could design the older part of this building as the back appendage of a new home. But at that point, it would be hidden from the public realm. And I think it just would present a bit of a challenge. But I am very conscious of the fact that we shouldn't just, in my mind, permit demolition without carefully thinking it through.
Thanks, Glenn. I don't have anything to add, and I'm in line with staff's comments. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, and I'll just throw out there that it's fortunate that this is in an X zone, so it really can kind of retain the same finished floor height and scale of the neighboring properties, but obviously that's not really in our purview. So I'll make a motion for final approval of demolition.
We have a motion for final approval. Is there a second?
This is Bill. I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. All right, we'll put it to a vote. Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
Bill.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Moving on to agenda item number 2, 66 Queen Street. Kim, if you would start us off with an introduction.
Thank you, Lindsay. 66 Church Street is requesting final approval for piazza enclosure at rear. Building is a category 3 and in the Charlestown neighborhood. It was built in 1784 and in the Old and Historic District. For a little bit of context and to orient you with the project, here's an aerial view. You can see it's on the east side of the street. Here's a Google image of the existing site and the piazza in question. And this is looking south and north. Here's the side of the house, the north side. And if the applicant wants to take it from here, Mr. Liberatos, you have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Liberatos. I'm an architect representing Mr. and Mrs. Stanley Porter, the new owners of this house at 66 Church Street. Could we have picture 2 up, please? Picture number 2. Thanks. I'm going to be asking for approval to allow the Porters to glaze in one piazza bay on the 2nd floor in the rear behind the main corner of this house. But first, I'd like to say that I believe that porches are one of the defining features of the historic district. And in general, I'm opposed to their being enclosed indiscriminately. I've even turned down jobs that have asked me to do so. However, I'm not absolutely opposed to it when it's done well, which is to say easily reversible for the future and nicely detailed and proportioned for the present. Obviously, the city isn't opposed to it absolutely either. Otherwise, staff wouldn't have accepted this application. Still, this is the first time I've ever made an application to enclose even a single piazza bay, so I'll explain the reasons behind my making an exception in this case. Could we have picture 4, please? Picture number 4. Not that one. It's labeled number 4. It shows the existing conditions in the rear. That will work. If we could have more of those images, that'd be great. Can everyone see that? The picture? Okay, so.
My apologies.
That's all right. Thank you. Like so many people, the Porters would like to have somewhere to eat that isn't the formal dining room. If you look at the 2nd floor plan, you'll see that the current kitchen is standing room only. And in the 2 photographs, the kitchen is behind the cantilevered bay window, that bank of windows, which was designed by Randolph Martz as part of the renovation of this house in 2005. At first, the Porters asked about replacing this new cantilevered bay with a larger one to make the kitchen itself larger. There's no policy that I'm aware of that would preclude them from doing that, from tearing off that bay and building a larger one. But I talked them out of it because that cantilevered bay is really great. It's beautiful. And I don't believe that there'd be a way to add a larger cantilever and have it be done as nicely as that one. Secondly, if you look back at the floor plans, the room immediately behind the kitchen to the east in the former dependency, which could be used as dining, is unfortunately up a flight of steps, which for older people is impractical. Could we have picture 3 up, please? That's it. Thirdly, the bay that we are proposing to be enclosed used to be enclosed for longer than it has been opened, as it was only opened in the recent renovation by Mr. Martz. I believe that enclosing this one inset bay with traditional glazing might very well have been part of that original 2005 renovation, had it been requested by the owners at that time. And I believe had Mr. March proposed this bay to be enclosed then and in this manner, it would have been approved. Could we go back to the picture 5, please, of the existing conditions back there? Thanks. Fourthly, I used to work for Mr. Martz and am familiar with his detailing, which is traditional Charleston detailing, and I would ensure that the details of this new enclosure would harmonize with those of the rest of the house. Fifthly, as I said at the outset, this bay is on the second floor of the piazza and around the rear corner of the main house. And even though it would be well detailed, it would be hardly visible from the street. And then finally, owning a historic house like this is expensive, and the new owners understand that they will have become essentially caretakers of this important building. And I believe that allowing this minor and easily reversible alteration would make this house more livable for them, and that it should be allowed. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Liberatos. Do we have any questions from the board?
Am I mistaken, or are there not really any existing plans or existing elevations of the existing condition? They're just proposed, really, right? I think we can figure out what's going on, but
no, if you look at the street elevation, there's no proposed change to that elevation.
Okay, but the elevations that do change, we don't have the existing versions of those. You do?
Yes, you do. If you look at the existing south elevation, there's no proposed changes. You see that we would rebuild the bank of French doors that exist exactly as they are, but bringing them forward, and so the elevation doesn't change. The only elevation that changes is the rear elevation, which I've got drawn both existing and proposed on the last page.
So you're basically just replicating the wall that's there now and pulling it out on toward the south?
It's essentially a bank of French doors. There's no wall at all, but yeah, we would be replicating that and bringing it.
And retaining the existing one as well. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. But I guess the east elevation would have a difference, right? And we just don't have that existing.
Yes, it's page 3.
Gotcha.
So the top left is existing and the top right would be the proposed.
Okay, there's just no existing plan, but okay, that's fine. I got it.
Thank you.
Kim, can you go back to the other drawing sheet? Thank you.
Are there any other board questions at this time?
That's just one more. Are you you're cutting into the balustrade at the east elevation, correct? To add your pilaster?
Yes, there'd be a few balusters taken out, but as you can see, that's a new railing from the recent renovation, but the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Any other board comment? Excuse me, board questions? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Kim, let's see. All right, we have a position statement from the Preservation Society of Charleston. Kim, I'm going to assume that I'll read all of these for this meeting, correct?
Yes, Lindsay, thank you.
For 66 Church Street, dear board members, the Preservation Society is generally not supportive of piazza infill in accordance with the BAR policy statement on piazza enclosures that emphasizes the importance of preserving this important and characteristic feature of Charleston's vernacular architectural. Based on the information provided in this application, it is difficult to understand the existing condition of the area to be impacted by the proposed piazza enclosure. This is a relatively early single house in the sensitive historic district, and we feel clear documentation is needed to adequately consider this request. Thank you for considering our position in this matter. Sincerely, Aaron Minigan. Do we have anyone speaking? Kim?
We do. We have April Wood. April, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for a piazza enclosure at the rear of 66 Church Street. As stated in the BAR policy statement on piazza enclosures, Charleston piazzas are a building feature unique to and closely identified with the architectural history and urban character of the city that should be preserved to retain the prevailing character of the city. To enclose piazzas and incorporate them into the interior of buildings eliminates this unique feature. While we think the applicant has made an exceptionally thoughtful application for the piazza enclosure, and the owner has been an excellent steward of this important house, we do not support the visible enclosure of the piazza at the rear of 66 Church Street. We respectfully recommend denial of this application. Thank you.
Yeah, April. Kim, is there anyone else speaking from the public?
We also have a letter from the Neighborhood Association. Lindsay, do you have that in front of you?
I do not.
Okay, they made a comment on our innovation website. Teresa Smythe, the Charlestown Neighborhood Association is not supportive of this application. We stand with Preservation Society's position. So that was from the Charlestown Neighborhood Association, and that is all we have.
All right. Now let's move on to city staff comments and recommendations.
We have just a couple, some comments first. The recent renovations have reversed some insensitive piazza modifications, and we appreciate those modifications. The loss of the historic fabric is unfortunate. We are pleased to see the retention of the balustrade. The piazza enclosure proposal meets the approval criteria set forth in the policy statement for piazza enclosures with the following statements. The necessity for the additional area which results from the enclosure is sufficiently compelling that any alternative solution results in unacceptable alteration in historic fabric. And two, the location of the piazzas in the rear, minimal in size if staff comments are incorporated, and does not alter the conceptual relationship between the house, piazza, or hyphen. So we have three comments. Number one, the visual impact of the oblique angle will read as very solid and should incorporate more glass to help further differentiate the enclosure. So requesting to use door type B or similar to enlarge the light pattern, or the door slab to incorporate more glass and eliminate the excess mullion. Our second comment, shift screening and new column to extend to one bay instead of two, and provide detail how the rear elevation will incorporate into the balustrade. So staff's recommending conceptual approval with staff comments and final review by staff.
Thank you, Kim.
Christopher, I can give you a copy of those.
Thank you.
Mr. Liberato, did you want to respond to anything raised by the public or staff comments?
No, I'm not sure whether a large plate glass enclosure would help. You know, the ordinance calls for additions to be harmonious with existing buildings. So I'm not sure I would come back with a proposal for large plate glass. I think that enclosing this piazza bay with French doors that would match all the other French doors in the house would be the best solution. I think I'll submit it to the board for review at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Liberato. Let's do that. Let's open it up to board discussion and a vote.
Very quickly, Kim, can you point out your comment about the, I think, engagement of or around the column? One of your comments right there at the end.
So shift screening to the and new column to extend to one bay instead of two. We'd like to see it moved back to here. if you can see my cursor, instead of here.
Okay, thank you.
Can I make a comment?
No, it's right now it's during board discussion, and so if anyone has a specific question for Mr. Liberatos, I'd welcome the question to Mr. Liberatos.
This is Bill. Mr. Liberatos, do you have a comment?
Yes, I think if I may speak about that last proposal to put the south bank of French doors about halfway up, that would kill this proposal because even one bay is quite small, and it's there wouldn't be enough room to use it as even a small dining room if we put the wall there.
I'll ask another question. What are the dimensions of that room? I don't think we have that.
The existing dimensions of that bay, of the Piazza Bay, you mean?
Of the room that you're intending to create there.
It's about 9 feet square, maybe 9.5. And also, if I may, the relationship of the what the relationship of the balustrade would be to the new pilaster is shown in the detail plan number 3 there. You can see the section going through the French doors, and you can see the existing railing which would remain there. And you can see that the bank of French doors is tucked back behind the corner of the main house. And it fits nicely with the new pilaster there, and the new pilaster would be made to match the existing columns.
Okay, so Kim, a quick question for you. So you're saying that in your estimation, the necessity for this room is sufficiently compelling, right? That doing anything else or not having that room would be.
I think if the wall is moved to the rear and not hugging the corner here, with its minimal visibility, then it is compelling.
Okay. And I might just throw out a slight variation on that move. Maybe if I guess that's the east side wall of this enclosure could pull in just far enough so that the balustrade can continue uninterrupted, that might do it for me. But I'm curious what other people think.
Kim Fillmore here. Quick question. Is the east elevation visible? Yeah.
That's the south.
Well, we're talking about the east, Kim, like where the balustrade is interrupted by the pilaster.
Is the back elevation visible?
It will be.
Okay. Okay, that's what I was, from looking there, it looks like it was. Okay, thank you.
So, lay board member here, I think I'm just not understanding the plan. And Julia, maybe your questions, you can answer this, and maybe Mr. Liberatos, this may be a question for you. I'm looking at sheet 2 of these plans. So is that wall coming out in between here to sheet 2? Now this is where I wish we were in person. Is this just a square rim? I'm not seeing how the kitchen is extended.
Am I on mute?
Nope, I can hear you.
Okay. No, it wouldn't really be an extension of the kitchen. It would be a small dining room for them, an informal dining room.
Okay.
Off the kitchen.
Okay, from your presentation, I thought that this was going
they had originally asked of me if we could make the kitchen larger, but I just am not willing to propose tearing off that bay window and cantilevering out even more. And even if we were to do that, that would essentially be burying the piazza bay that we're talking about in further light. The other thing about moving the east wall in is that would require a corner, a glazed, a sort of stanchion at the corner that wouldn't be touching any of the colonnade. And to me, this is the traditional way of infilling columns, is to have the glazing abut a column or a pilaster.
I would agree if it was an original column, but this is set back from that and distinct, which is why, in my estimation, it seems like that would be okay, and it would sort of address staff's concern about the visibility a little bit, and it would allow the balustrade to stay intact. But curious again what other board members think.
This is Bill. I would say that I do agree with the comments of staff, and I believe the recommendation of staff. I guess I appreciate Kim, you making that point clear about your comment about potentially pulling the extension back towards the kitchen. I think that's a strong comment. Yeah, I guess in seeing that and hearing that comment from staff, it really is minimizing the enclosure to the point of where it's not even fully encompassing one bay proper. So in that instance, I believe I could support staff's recommendation. But in this extent, I believe it's just that bit more extensive. I believe the difference would be pretty great if it was pulled back just again those couple of feet as staff had suggested.
Glenn Gardner, I feel like a lot of times this would be a non-starter, but the applicant has definitely, I think, put a good foot forward, trying to show what they're capable of doing. In my mind, there is some finesse that is needed. And I think there's a question of the method and sort of how far you could or could not pull it back to even make this worth doing. But I think that's sort of a discussion point that we all have to be set on, to give them a very clear directive as to whether they should pursue this or not.
Fillmore here. I want to follow up with Glenn's comment. That is that Mr. Liberato stated that if he had to pull that back very much, I think that it doesn't make it practical. And so, Kim, can you give us a little guidance into sort of the dimensions of that comment about pulling it back? Are we talking about pulling it back 6 inches? Are we talking about pulling it back a foot or half the distance? What were you?
Well, if there's some way that they can, Mr. Liberatos can adjust this. Right now, the logical place for me to break this is right here. But if there's some way he can adjust it to maybe where this looks like 18 inches or so.
Okay, yes, okay.
2 feet from the corner. From this photo, I see from this gutter leader downspout, I see 6 of the glass bank windows. And that to me lands, which am I going? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I can see to here. So if he pulls it in that much, I feel that the policy statements are upheld. And there's no real loss of relation from the main house to the hyphen or kitchen house.
What are the total dimensions of that room again? Right now, as proposed, what are the dimensions?
9 by 9, according to the applicant.
So if it came back 2 feet, it would be 7 by 9. It becomes a small space.
And the other question at hand is how close to that door, the existing door, does it get? And then my other question, and of course it's completely out of our purview, but from a planning standpoint, if I were told, for example, to pull the wall back in a couple of feet, I'd look at that existing French door wall and that counter and maybe taking those out, and you have the extension of a pretty good sized room there.
I think he wants to keep it reversible, which I admire. Again, the only thing that bothers me is that introduction of a de facto new column that breaks the balustrade. That doesn't make sense to me, but maybe if he just moves that wall to the north a foot, maybe that's a fine compromise. And he can adjust the fenestration on the east side to and or south side as needed.
May I speak?
I don't think so.
Unless there's a question asked of you, Julia, did you have a question for Mr. Liberato?
I really didn't, but I'll ask if he wants to say something. Would you like to say something?
Well, the issue about moving that corner up a foot even, I'm not sure that would work, because by treating it as a pilaster, that column and that pilaster become a pair. If we put an arbitrary foot or a foot and a half or 2 feet between that pilaster and the column, it no longer looks as like a pair. It looks like a sort of arbitrarily placed pilaster. Whereas if you put the pilaster just next to a column, it looks like it's done on purpose. The other
Or if you
result,
just pulled it in past the balustrade, like I suggested, because I see that detail a lot downtown, where the enclosure doesn't align exactly with the column, so they pull it in and just create a new corner and leave the balustrade alone. All right. Does anybody have an idea of a motion?
Julia, it's Glenn. I'm just going to make one more quick comment. I think this is a case where if a motion does move forward and there is an acceptable distance, kind of reached with the staff comment, this might be a very easy blue foam board mock-up on site for people to look at to see how how it moves forward to final, if that might be a reasonable suggestion with regard to a mock-up.
You want to make a motion to that effect?
I think you were headed toward one.
You do?
One more here. I'll just interject before the motion is made that even though I think that this is about as sensitively done in the existing plan to achieve the existing plan, perhaps as you can hope for, maybe except for the double column, I think there would be a better way to treat that and perhaps leave that balustrade totally intact and exterior. Except for that, I think this is about as sensitively done as you could hope for. However, it's still a porch enclosure, and on a lot of these single houses, these antebellum single houses, of course, that turn in the piazza to the back and then landing on what today we might call a mudroom is a common feature. And I think as drawn, I would not support this, even though I think it is about as good an enclosure under these circumstances as you could hope to achieve. It still is a porch enclosure, and I think I lean heavily towards not supporting porch enclosures, particularly on really prominent houses like this.
Well, I'm just gonna throw a motion out there and see what happens. How about a motion for conceptual approval for this piazza enclosure with board conditions that the east wall and pilaster be disengaged from the balustrade, and that the south wall of the enclosure be shifted north approximately 1 foot.
Can you repeat that last board condition, or the second board condition? So I've got the east wall and the pilaster be disengaged from the balustrade, and
That the south wall be shifted north approximately 1 foot. And I think that leaves some negotiation room for staff.
okay. So
And I would say final review by staff if that motion applies.
Okay, so I've got a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with board condition that the east wall and the pilaster be disengaged from the balustrade and the south wall be shifted north approximately 1 foot with staff comments and final review by staff. Is that right, Julia? So staff comments in addition to the 2 board comments?
No. I think you can just leave it just with the board comments.
Or it's okay, board comment and final review by staff. Kim, did you get that?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
All right, do I have a second to Julia's motion? No second. Do we have any further board discussion then?
This is Bill. I would say I'm good with everything in that motion except potentially where that south wall shifts northward. I believe there is some merit in staff's comment about the establishment of a bay rhythm that's similar to the projecting bay adjacent. And I believe that was why the distance was not set, but I think it's to say that shift screening at new column and new column to extend to 1 bay instead of 2. And I do believe there's merit in that comment. So that was really the only difference between my opinion and your motion.
Okay, Bill, do you want to put a revised motion on the floor?
I'll just say that I am a little sensitive to the applicant's plea for a room that's big enough for a table. I think if you halved the length of it from north to south, it would be pretty much impossible. And I don't think that east elevation is really visible to the public. But I'm happy to hear another motion. Bring it on.
All right, this is Bill. I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with staff's comments and an additional board comment that the east wall be disengaged from the balustrade. Is there another comment, Julia? I'm sorry. That was the main one I keyed in on.
Yeah, I guess you just overrode my comment about moving the wall north, and I was trying to stipulate that it be moved further north. So yeah, you're good.
Okay, yes. That is my motion. And final review by staff.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comments and a board condition that the east wall and the pilaster be disengaged from the balustrade. And final review by staff.
Yes.
All right. Do we have a second? No second. Let's continue discussion.
Glenn Gardner, I'll just add two comments of things that I'm sort of looking for. I think we need a dimension plan. I know there's a scale on the submittal, but I think we need dimensions showing what the proposal is showing the exact distance of the new proposed enclosure. And I'm not so certain about the final review. I just think that we cannot take a piazza enclosure lightly, and I know that we're not, but I think we just have to be very careful setting precedent if we're looking at going against our board policy for piazza enclosure.
May I speak?
No, not at this time. Hey, Glenn, can we talk about the way in which it goes against our policy statement? I'm just looking at it and
And I'll ask Kim if I'm mistaken, but generally we have followed a policy statement disallowing piazza enclosures across the board.
So they have to meet certain criteria. There are two criteria in particular.
Can I jump in here? So I see the two criteria, the necessity for the additional area. And I think that's what's really getting me here is the necessity of it. When I originally listened to this and I realized I viewed the plans wrong, I thought that it was somehow going to be an extension of the kitchen, and I'm just not seeing the necessity of this room here, and especially with the comments to shift that wall north and to make the room even smaller, and it's just going to be for the purpose of fitting a table. So the two requirements, the necessity for the additional area and the location of the piazza enclosure shall be to the rear and minimal in size and not alter the conceptual relationship. I think it's minimal and in size. I think it's well done. I think it's the necessity that is getting me here.
Film over here. I don't disagree with that, and I think perhaps there could be a way to do this where it would be so minimally visible that it might sort of meet the requirements. I think that we try to stick with what I think maybe it was Glenn or Bill, that, you know, the existing French door enclosure might be shifted slightly and provide just enough space for a very small kitchen table. And I also know that there are others, it looks like there are other spaces in the floor plan that could provide the necessary extra square footage as well. And so I don't disagree with Lindsay that I think it's the necessity part of this that I'm struggling with, as well as the fact that we tend to be very cautious about setting precedents on things like porch enclosures. And I think that it's important that we maintain that consistency.
Fillmore, I hear everything you're saying, and I think you're fairly well on target. I'll underscore, my earlier comment that if I didn't think that it had been thoughtfully, brought to us, I think it would have been a non-starter. I mean, clearly they have been carefully thinking this through and obviously trying to detail it well. So I want to make sure the applicant knows that I think they're doing about as good of a job as they can to ask for something that generally is prohibited.
Right. I agree completely with what you said, Glenn. I think we need to move on to some kind of a motion. I would make a motion for deferral for restudy of the size of the porch enclosure and its visibility.
We have a motion on the floor for deferral for restudy of the porch enclosure, the size of the porch enclosure and visibility. Do I have a second?
Madam Chairman, may I ask for a clarification? When you say the sight line, are you talking about providing a sight line study, Fillmore?
Yes, or just more thorough drawings with perhaps a different arrangement, which didn't enclose basically the turn in the porch. I think you could get away with enclosing a little bit of the north side of that, or rearranging it so that the current north wall of the porch is pulled south a little bit. But I think simply enclosing that section of the porch is, I wouldn't support it. And to reiterate what's been said over and over again, in spite of the fact that I think this is a very sensitive attempt at that, I think a huge number of those spaces over the years have been enclosed, and that turn back is an original feature on a lot of big single houses, and I think it's a shame to lose it. And even though it's very sensitive, I think that turn back is important to maintain.
So I have a question on that front. Don't you think that the existing location of the glass wall enclosure there is the original location of the hyphen wall, which probably aligns with the floor above it?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's why I'm reluctant to ask him to move that, because I think he's trying to make this reversible.
I think that's very possible.
Looks like it lines up with the floor above, and
Okay.
I would tend to suspect it's original.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. That wall, not the way it's done, but the wall itself is probably original. I think so. Yeah, it's original. I imagine it probably is, yes. So.
Yeah, I guess the point of sort of trying to figure out the plan for the applicant, it's really not something we need to be doing, but in what I had mentioned before about potentially removing that existing French door wall system, that was added in 2005, and there's a counter adjacent to it that's probably added at the same time. I'm not suggesting removing that bit of wall there between the kitchen island, that little corner there. I was suggesting leaving all that and any headers in place as well. So I was just mainly talking about potentially removing the 2005 additional material. And also there would be some leveling to this floor that's going to happen anyway. So the point of demarcation is going to be sort of taken away at some point anyway. So the main thing I'm talking about potentially removing would be those two 2005 features, which would appear to open up that space, and therefore allowing this proposed addition wall to move northward. And I believe the sightline study may be of merit, Fillmore, because I think what we're going to see, as we see in that first original photograph that was shown, if there is air seen between that column and maybe not even seeing the corner of this glass enclosure, or minimal visibility of that glass enclosure, but seeing a lot of air there at that return, that's going to hopefully address your point, Fillmore, about having the semblance of a return remain. So if it's a motion for deferral pending a sightline study and more refined drawings, I think I can support that. I just wanted to clarify where I would be coming from and what I would be looking for in that statement. But I can see supporting that motion.
I'm going to ask the applicant just to confirm or clarify whether the existing wall that encloses the hyphen is in the original hyphen location and aligns with the third floor wall above.
That's correct. In fact, the cantilevered bay, if you look at this second floor plan there, that's projecting forward from that old wall line, which does, as you rightly say, align with the existing bank of French doors. But I would like to add that the French doors that I've designed for the enclosure of this bay, it just so happens that they all work out to have the exact same proportions as the existing French doors. And if we start moving one wall in an arbitrary amount and another wall in another arbitrary amount, I'm worried that the proportions of the French doors are going to reflect that arbitrary dimension rather than the existing proportions of the existing glazing.
So, Bill, did you make a new motion for deferral pending a sightline study and more defined drawings?
No, I did not. I was simply clarifying what Fillmore had mentioned, which was more refined drawings. I believe, Fillmore, you mentioned more refined drawings. And then I don't know if you mentioned the sightline study. Was that your intent?
I did not. I mean, that might be helpful. I was shooting at a motion for deferral rather than outright denial, which tends to put the brakes on harder than a deferral. I think there might be a way to do this that might gain more board support. And I was just trying to move in that direction. We're going to have, at some point, we're going to have to make a motion to either, accept, defer, or deny this. And so,
my motion, which was the second one, was to accept it with the staff's conditions. And I believe that actually staff's comment does address the point that the applicant just made about the rhythm of that adjacent bay. And staff had mentioned maybe one bay rhythm to that. So I'm not going to restate my motion, but I do believe that staff's weighing of the scenario was valuable, and that's why I was inclined to go with that.
And as a point of order, I think we do have a motion on the floor at the moment.
if it's Fillmore, if it's my motion, I withdraw it.
Okay, do we have Fillmore's motion has been withdrawn. Do we have a new motion on the floor?
All right, this is Bill. I'll make a motion for deferral pending a sightline study to be provided by the applicant and also detailed drawings. And also I would make the applicant aware of board condition that the east wall be disengaged from the balustrade and any new proposals.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for deferral pending a sightline study from the applicant and receipt of more defined drawings and a board comment that the east wall be disengaged from the balustrade. Did I properly state that, Bill?
I'll second that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Julia. I'll now put it to a vote. Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Julia.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with a majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Liberatos.
Thank you.
Moving to agenda item number 3, 48 Bull Street. Kim, if you'll start us out with an introduction.
I will, thank you. "48 Bull Street is requesting conceptual approval for 4 new dependency buildings and a raised terrace. The building is a category 3 in the Charleston Village and built in 1848 and in the Old and Historic District. Here's an aerial image just for a little bit of context. It's on the north side of Bull Street between Pitt and Smith, just south of Calhoun. Here's another image just showing the visibility sightlines between the driveways on both Pitt and Smith into the lot, and then the parking lot that fronts Calhoun. Here's the parking lot from Calhoun Street, and you can see the white and yellow building in the back is the building in question, 48 Bull. This property has some history. In 2007, Randolph Marks had this proposal approved for 4 detached units. And here's the previous site section with those 4 buildings. And then behind that, you can see the existing buildings. I think this is probably Smith. Here's the elevation of one of those houses. And this is a plan of the pump house necessary for the property that's in the rear, the back right side of the property. And here are some details on that pump house building. And then elevation, arch, everything like that. But again, as I said, this project has some history. So there were 5 iterations submitted. This being number 5, 2006. And I'm just going to quickly show you all of these because in those years, this was a big, it's just a contentious project. And it had a lot of review time, a lot of board time and staff time. So this was the one that almost made it through. Reduced to 1.5 stories. Here's another iteration. The 3rd iteration. The 2nd iteration. And the 1st shows 3 different main massings with 5 units. Townhouses here. With that, if our applicant, Robbie Marty, is ready, you have the floor, Robbie, whenever you're ready.
Hey, this is Robbie. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So this, as Kim said, this property has it has a lot of history through the BAR and then also just within sort of the city. So the existing two-story masonry building, as was said, was constructed sometime between 1786 and 1808. And it is situated on 3/4 of an acre, which is a really large lot for this neighborhood. In the beginning of the Second World War, the house was parceled into several apartments. And then an additional apartment building was constructed on the back of the lot. Kim, can you page to the second image on the PDF? There. Okay, so this is the survey of the existing house, and you can sort of see it's on sort of the front half of the property. And then if you go to the next screen, this is an older survey. It's actually turned around the other direction, but you can see on the bottom right hand of the screen, there is a building that, and that was the apartment building that was added sometime after the Second World War. The apartment building was demolished in the early 2000s, and the existing building has been reconfigured and renovated the interior many times, and it is currently a duplex. So sometime around the same time that the apartment building was removed, the owners of the building agreed to enter into a conservation easement with the city, and that limited the development on the rear portion of the property to 5 residential units, which is what, as Kim was talking about, the different reiterations that happened about 15 years ago. It stipulates the setback from the street and that the building height be under the existing building height. And as I said, we're limited to 5 residential units. I think that it is worthy to note that if, and I know that we're not dealing with zoning, but I think that when we talk about height, scale, and mass on this particular piece of property, that in traditional zoning regulations, this size would be allowed to have 14 units on it. And so 5 units is significantly under what the city of Charleston zoning allows. So, all right, Kim, if you'll just sort of, will you just page through? So this is these are the Sanborn maps. I've circled the building. You can kind of see the circa 1902, and then to the right of it, 1944, that shows the apartment building. Then if you'll go to the next one. Then again, this is the existing site plan, but I did put a fill in to just show where that building was and sort of the scale of it. And if you'll go to the next, these are Google Earth maps. This is what I believe, this photograph on the bottom left was in the BAR file, which makes me think that it may be the apartment building that was there, although there is an apartment building that is exactly like it, that is adjacent to the property. So it's hard to say whether or not this was the building, but I have a feeling just the size and the shape, it probably looked a lot like that. And then on the top right, you can see there's a Google map image from 1999 that shows the apartment building. All right, next page. This is the view from Bull Street of the existing 2-story masonry building with a single story porch. And then the next few, if you can just sort of go through those, Kim, this shows an addition that was done in 2000, I believe 6 or 7, to the building. And then these are the views from sort of the driveway into the property and out of. And then this is the lot in the back. Currently it's a gravel lot and it's surrounded by an 8-foot wooden fence. This is the Google image of the site with the surrounding properties mapped. And again, you can just see sort of significantly how much bigger this lot is than the typical surrounding property. You'll go to the next image. So this brings us to what our proposal is. So the what we are asking for, in short, is a garage building, a coach house with an apartment above it, and then 3 single-family townhouse units beyond that. Then there's a raised terrace that connects the existing addition to the new coach house. If you'll go to the next, oh, actually right here, if you'll flip back just very quickly, as part of the preservation setback, the conservation easement stipulates that the new buildings not be closer to Bull Street than 170 feet, and you can kind of see that on the bottom of the site plan. So where that line is falls in about the middle of the terrace. So we have set the buildings actually even further back from the historic house, kind of delineating the difference in this. And I'd also like to just note, we had a great deal of discussion with Historic Charleston, the Preservation Society, the neighborhood, and also the city of Charleston in kind of working on these buildings. So wow, this is the first time we've formally been before your board. We have had a good bit of discussion. All right, so next slide. So this is just the floor plan of the garage building and the terrace, and you can kind of see that you enter the garage on the north side. This the current owners of this property have young boys, and so they are interested in. And I know the program doesn't affect the architecture, but they're interested in having as much sort of outdoor and recreational space for their boys as possible. And so that is one of the things that is sort of driving this program for them a little bit. So you can go to the next screen. The apartment over the garage is a 2-bedroom, and is sort of situated, it's north to south. And there's kind of like a little bit of a loggia roof that connects the garage to the historic building. And then if you'll go to the next page, this is the, we're proposing just simple standing seam metal roofs, similar to what is on the historic building. If you'll go to the next. These are the floor plans of the townhouses. The townhouses are 2 stories. They're 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths. They all have their own entry and then a screened porch on each one of them. The next will be just shows the floor plan of the second floor. Kim, if you'll go to the next page. So you can just kind of see the bedroom plan. And then the next is the roof plan that shows sort of the connecting of the roofs. And then on to the next views. This is what the view would be from Bull Street. So our goal here was to kind of keep in a typical preservation sight line, to have the new buildings sort of situated fully behind the existing building, which is a little bit different from the original proposals that were, that kind of went through all of the board stuff many years ago. So from this sight line, the buildings they will be visible from the right and the left simply because of the size of the property, but they will be minimally visible. You can go to the next screen. So this begins to show the sketch renderings of what the sight lines would be, both down the driveway side and then also on the west side of the property. There are also an awful lot of trees. This is a really, really beautiful lot on the front part of the property. Then the next slide begins to show what the building looks like. So this is the raised terrace with the loggia roof, and then the coach house garage and apartment above. Then the apartment buildings beyond. If you'll go to the next screen, Kim. These show the townhouse units. We've just worked a lot on proportion and sort of pushing and pulling the buildings with to minimize the footprint and the scale. One of the things that that I've also worked on was the existing building is pretty simple. It's masonry and double hung windows with a standing seam metal roof, and it seemed appropriate to keep that same kind of language of just simple stucco standing seam roof, very clean masonry details, and the coach house will have double hung windows, and then we have casement windows in the townhouse units.
Marty, you got about a minute left.
Okay, I am just about done. So you can go to the next slide. This shows the views from the west side, which would be sort of the backyards of the units. And then if you'll go, the next screen shows this is, and I think this is a really, really important view. So this is the driveway side showing our eave heights, the building heights, and the height, and how all of this is lower and more diminutive than the existing structure. If you'll flip one more, it'll show the back side. So this is the west side of the units, and again, just sort of showing how the eaves drop down. And Kim, if you just for the last minute, if you want to just kind of flip through the larger elevations, this is the north, and then again the east of the townhouses from the west side, and then this is how they connect to each other, just from the south elevation of the townhouse and connecting to the coach house. And then there should just be, yeah, this is the coach house, and again showing the heights of and the relationship of the eave to the existing building. And then I think there's like one or two more. Yeah. And this is the view through kind of the raised terrace of the north, sorry, the coach house. That is all.
Thank you, Ms. Marty. Do my fellow board members have any questions for Ms. Marty at this time?
I have a couple quick ones. Can you kind of just explain kind of why the new houses are elevated so much? It seems like with the flood zone, they would only need to go up like 3 feet, but just if you could articulate that for me.
So the townhouses are and so Kim, will you flip to the one of the sketch views, sort of looking down the driveway? Yeah, this is perfect. Actually, go back. The one that you just had it on was good. There. So the height of the entry porch at each townhouse, that is the required elevation, reflecting the new flood zone elevation with the 2-foot freeboard that's required by the city. And then in order to just not have such a car heavy site, we did add a small garage under each of the townhouse units, and it's only really in the front portion of the garage. So it creates almost a little bit of a story and a half feel to that front sort of protruding part of the townhouse units.
And then the first floor of the coach house seems really tall. What's the ceiling height there?
The ceiling height in the coach house is 12 feet. And again, that reflects the desire of the homeowner to sort of maximize the recreation ability with his kids. We had, I think that you all saw the program of the last application that we came through. What they really wanted to do was to be able to have almost like a basketball court feel on the inside, just so they could have a place for their kids to go as often as possible. We've reduced that down to 12 feet, but we're trying to keep it to a, to keep with their program.
And then one last thing, the terrace, why is it raised so much? I mean, you have to walk down then to get into the coach house. Could the terrace not be lowered some?
The idea from the client side was to be able to have a seamless, is that would be the terraces for them. And so they wanted to just simply be able to walk out of their rear door and maybe have 1 or 2 steps down onto the terrace instead of several steps.
Thank you.
Any other board questions? All right, we'll move on to public comment. We have a position statement from the Preservation Society of Charleston. Dear board members, the Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for reaching out and meeting with us on this project. We have seen significant improvement, particularly in the architectural direction of the project through our meetings, and appreciate the architect's response to our feedback. However, we are still struggling with the height and mass of the coach house building. The massing of the building is exacerbated by the elevated terrace connecting it to the main building, and we encourage continued study of opportunities to further reduce these elements to be more subordinate and deferential to the historic building. Thank you for considering our position in this matter. Sincerely, Aaron Minigan. We have one email. From Amanda Griffith, agenda item number 3, 48 Bull Street. My family owned 47 Pitt Street in the 1980s and rehabilitated it. The yard is significantly below the level of Pitt Street, and all the site drains to the west into the rear yard at 48 Bull Street. The water then drains towards Smith Street. How will the water be dealt with when so much of the site is covered with hardscape? Signed, Amanda Griffith at 107 Bull Street. We also have a letter from the Charleston Village Association dated March 23rd, 2021. Make this larger. Dear members of BARS, we have reviewed the application for the construction of a range of buildings behind the historic house of 48 Bull Street and met recently on site with the project's architecture. We appreciate the efforts owner and designer have exerted to use the historic house to mask the proposed garage and residential buildings from Bull Street, as well as the parameters an existing easement within the city establishes for development of this large site. We remain concerned that their proposed height. We remain concerned that at their proposed height, the proposed range of buildings will loom over adjacent houses that face Smith Street. We are concerned too that the proposed rooftop balconies may be less amenable to neighborly relationships. We recommend further study of both the west facade of the condominium units and the placement and size of the rooftop balconies. We are also concerned about the potential this project has the potential to exacerbate flooding along Smith Street by shedding more water into the creek, now filled, that wound through the center of the block, now bound on the east by Pitt Street, the south by Bull Street, the west by Rutledge Avenue, and the north by the Calhoun Street. We understand that underground runoff storage tanks are planned for the site and encourage PCR to ensure that these tanks are large enough to contain all runoff from the site. It is important to the neighborhood that the final design for this project retain all runoff from its buildings and not shed it toward neighboring properties. Sincerely, the BAR-BZA Committee of the Charleston Village Association. And I see we have a position statement here from Historic Charleston Foundation, but I believe April Wood is on the line to read that.
So April does not have her position statements from March, but she has not signed up tonight to speak.
So should I read this, Kim?
May I make a comment? So we've coordinated with First Historic Charleston, and they did say that they don't have any comments on the revised plan. And then secondly, the letter that you read from the Charleston Village Association references the previous application, which we deferred. We have again regrouped with them, and they also said that they had no comments for this particular. They actually said they appreciated that we, responded to their feedback about the things like the roof decks and the building footprint and height, and they would not have any comments on that. So just want to be up to date on comments, please.
Thank you. So, Kim, it sounds like April is not signed up to speak, so
That's right.
the statement should not be in the record. Okay. Do we have anyone, I don't see any other statements or letters. Do we have anyone present to speak from the public?
No, we don't. That's all.
All right, let's move on to city staff comments and recommendations.
Thank you. From the west, the townhouses appear as one large single building that overpowers the main house, making it insubordinate in height, scale, and mass. This may be more successful as a detached units, which would be contextually sensitive to the neighboring properties. The proposed carriage house is large for this building type. While the proposed carriage style doors mimic a traditional carriage house, the doors are 10 feet tall and the dimension from floor to floor is 14 feet, which is not permitted per zoning ordinance. The townhouse entrances should be the primary relationship to the courtyard, and instead the garages have the most interface with the shared space. The entry should be the primary focal point. The 8-foot tall privacy stucco wall attached to the house and proposed carriage house with a raised terrace behind is not typical of Charleston gardens, which employ courtyard walls that give delineation and are incorporated into gardens and greenery. These walls are typically a maximum of 6 feet tall and employ masonry piers, brick and other items of visual interest. And lastly, structures would be better reflect the context if they were detached as individual units. So the staff's recommending denial of staff comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Kim, quick question. What height district is this in?
2.5. I'll have to double check. Just give me one moment.
Ms. Marty, did you want to respond to any of the public comments other than your comments earlier that the Historic Charleston Foundation statement should be withdrawn and ask the other public comments and staff comments? Did you have anything to clarify or respond to?
The only thing I do want to add is that the flooding is an issue that the property owners take as seriously as their neighbors do. And so we're working very carefully with the civil engineers to deal with the flooding and drainage. And it is our intention to actually improve the situation. The way that the site is graded now is haphazard at best. And so the goal is to at least not make it worse and really to actually improve what the current situation is. And then secondly, that again, just on the footprint of these buildings in comparison to the lot, they're less than a quarter of, well, actually, that's not true. They're 27%. The lot coverage is 27%. So there still is a great deal of ground in the area. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mark.
Lindsay, to answer your question, it's in a 3. The height district is a 3.
All right, let's open it up for board discussion and a vote.
Kim, can I ask a favor? Is there a
EB.
Is there a view of the, thank you. Is there a view of the back of the historic structure with the profile of the proposed terrace? Maybe I just missed it. Be like a site section or a section through that terrace that looks at the back elevation of the historic.
No.
I've seen one, maybe. Robbie?
There's not. There's the terrace, sort of the section through the terrace that faces the proposed garage, but not the other way around. No.
I guess I was asking so I could see how much interface or interruption to the historic building there was. Do we have any indication of that?
Can I answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay. If you go to, either one of the site plans or the floor plans, the terrace actually does not connect to the historic building at all. It connects to the addition that was done several years ago. and it sets back. So you can kind of see in the bottom, sort of, I guess, right-hand corner where the terrace steps down. There are windows along that wall of the historic building at the basement level. And so we wanted to stay away from those just to give all of it a little bit of breathing room. So the full height of the terrace only connects to the addition and then sits back about 10 feet away, a little more than 10 feet from the historic building.
Okay, thank you.
Glenn Gardner, I may just go ahead with a comment based on where Bill was headed, I think, with that. I think what I'm really struggling with, I don't really have any comments about the townhouses, aside from the fact that if they moved forward, I think they just have to be very, very carefully detailed. But I'm really struggling with the scale and the height of both the terrace and the garage building. I think they're really overwhelming, and I'm not finding a sensitive connection to I'm not as worried about whether that piece of the back of the historic house is new or old. It's more the context to the historic building itself, and I'm struggling with that to a point that I'm aligned with staff's comments on this.
This is Julia, and I just want to acknowledge the efforts that the applicant has clearly made to work with the preservation groups and the neighborhood association and kind of get them on board, most of them. So that's really impressive. And, you know, I think it's perfectly reasonable for these owners to want to add dwellings to this giant property. The challenge is just doing so while being sensitive to the existing structure. There are some nice things going on with this design. I really appreciate how she's kept everything pinched in behind the width of the existing house. Although I can honestly imagine a solution where those parameters were violated, if the structures were a bit more diminutive. And I kind of agree that the raised terrace is a little bit jarring. And the height of the dependencies seems to be driven by parking alone and incongruous with the historic structure. So as much as I appreciate all the efforts that the applicants made, I'm pretty much in alignment with staff. I think if parking were removed from the program, it could all be lowered and adjusted to feel more subordinate without really affecting the square footage or other aspects of the program. And yeah, I'm aligned with staff. Sorry.
Fillmore Wilson here. I'm in line with the comments of my fellow board members and staff, and particularly with I struggle with the raised terrace, and I think Julia is on target that a lot of what's driving the height is the parking underneath the buildings, and the coach house is the building right now, I think, which I'm struggling most with the mass of, and then the height of the townhouses could come down a lot, I think, if there were a more sensitive parking plan than putting them under the building.
This is Bill. I think most everything's been said. Yeah, the key focus was I believe Glenn stated the raised terrace area and the coach house. Those are very, height of those are very problematic for me. And I agree with all the other comments made about the townhouses as well. So I believe I'm in alignment with the staff's position and the other board members.
Seems like we're coming to a consensus here.
Right. I will make a motion for staff recommendation for denial with staff comments.
We have a motion on the floor for denial with staff comments. Do I have a second?
Fillmore, I'll second.
Thank you. Put it to a vote. Glenn,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
Fillmore.
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Marty.
Yay, Ms. Martin.
Moving on to agenda item number 4, 12 Magazine Street. Yeah, give us an introduction.
Thank you. 12 Magazine Street is requesting preliminary approval for repairs, modification, and expansion of rear addition. The building's a category 4 in the Charlestown neighborhood and was built in 1783 and in the old historic district. I don't know if we've changed that date. We might have. For some context, this is the location of the property on Magazine Street at the intersection of Logan. And here it is coming down Magazine Street, driving west. And this is the addition in question. Here's the front facade. And another angle, that driveway is not part of the property. Just a closer view. Another view. Here's the 1888 and 1902 Sanborn maps. 1944 and 1951 show the connected addition, one-story porch. And if David Richards wants to take it from here, you have the floor.
Mr. Richard, you're on mute. Mr. Richards, we cannot hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, can you see me now?
No, yes, now we can.
Oh, there we go. Okay. All right, good. Sorry about that. Okay, yes, good to see you all again. So if I can get you, Kim, to flip over probably to the photographs of the house on sheet CS2. There you go. So the last time we presented to you all, I guess it was about a month ago, the board had some concerns that the addition that you see to the original house, I think everybody was on board with our intention to restore the original house to its original condition, as close as we can get to its original condition. But there was some concerns that the addition you see to that original house was historic. Clearly, the Sanborn map shows a structure there in 1910 that basically has the same footprint as the one you see here. So that y'all assessed to defer, and for us to get an opportunity to take Kim and Tori out there and take a look at the building fabric that's on site. After that meeting, I went, if you could flip over a page or two, one right there. I went out and opened up the walls to assess, what the condition and of those that the framing was. As you see in every location that I opened up, the wall framing is new, probably dating from the 1980s restoration. As you see in the lower right, there's concrete foundation and a poured in place slab on top of that. That concrete slab runs throughout the entirety of the addition. As you see, I've pulled back the carpet there, and that slab does in fact cover the entire footprint of the addition. So clearly, it seems that the construction was not the 1910 addition, even though it followed the same footprint and had the same porches. Subsequent to me taking these photographs, we opened up the ceilings, took the ceilings out completely, and Tori and Kim were able to come by and take a look at what we discovered. What we discovered was a sort of a collection of new and old materials. The older materials were salvaged. They may have been and likely were salvaged from that structure that was taken down, to my assessment, in the 1980s. There was oddly a door, an entire door that was used for the roof deck. So there was some old material in there, but the building that exists today, the addition that exists today, is a new addition, even though some of the materials were old. And I think there's no way around that. When you look at the foundation and the slab, there would have been no way to maintain the original structure and build a foundation and pour a slab underneath it. But they did, pay homage, I guess, to that earlier porch, and they left a porch in its location. If you could flip to the next slide, Kim. So a couple little items there. In that porch renovation, the porch that exists today, the railings, the top rail, bottom rail, and pickets likely were standard components that I've specified countless times on my projects. They're just a standard Southern lumber, top rail with cap and bottom rail with cap. And I know most of y'all probably use the same product on your projects. And so it's common. I don't believe these railings are old. The column itself, I'm very familiar with this. I'm doing this a long time. Typically newer columns, treated wood columns, are yellow pine, treated with yellow pine, and they'll have knots in them. The original older were heart pine and they didn't have any knots. So I think the columns are new. I don't know for sure. They could be older than that, but regardless. And that photo below is my first house. And when I came to Charleston back in the 80s, renovated it. And I, in fact, chamfered the columns just like is done here. So it wouldn't surprise me if all of this porch material is new, but I don't know for sure. There was some discussion around the gate, that it might be a Philip Simmons gate. I don't know. It may well be. I kind of, in a way, hope it is. That would certainly be something we would be proud to have. The detailing in it looks a little less than I would expect from somebody of his notability. But regardless, it's a nice gate, and if we I guess in our proposal are going to maintain that per some of the board's comments. In addition, we are also going to pay homage, as the current edition does, to the 1910 edition, and try to recreate or make reference to that earlier porch. So if I can probably just go directly to the elevations, Kim, I can get you from there to here. Okay, thank you. So the top drawing is, of course, the existing structure as it exists today. As we've talked about in the front portion of the building, we are intending to restore that, put gutters on to protect the structure, eliminate those non-original foundation vents, and clean it up as is necessary. So that bottom image is the initial application we made for a second floor, cleaning up a lot of those features of the addition that most everybody we spoke to, Historic Charleston Foundation Preservation Society, found objectionable, found it just doesn't meet the character and quality of the original beautiful structure. So we tried, we need Robin, who runs Worthwhile, it needs that space to make this a viable retail establishment. That's her kind of her working space, and so she'll have most of the rest of the space for her floor area. But in any case, we're cleaning that up. So that's and really making, this is a sort of a standard sort of feature where you'd have a 2-store piazza. I don't know of any 1-store piazzas that I can certainly call offhand. So we sort of tabled that idea, and if we can go to the next slide.
Mr. Richards, you've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So you go to the next page, Kim, page 14. There we go. No, I'm sorry. You had it. I didn't realize you switched. So back one. There we go. So we were going to submit the top drawing elevation, but when we discovered that we couldn't get Kim over and Tori over until just before the meeting, so we all elected the best to defer. They had some comments about this proposal as well, so we took those into consideration, and now at this meeting, resubmitting the proposal on the bottom there. So we got the panels below which soften the that's correct. Sort of soften the starkness of the contrast, but obviously you can assess that what is contemporary, what is new, what is of our time, and what is the traditional and historic structure. So there's a nice sort of composition there, we believe, that respects the original structure, but it also has a presence and of its own. And then you see the east elevation, the same thing. So we pay homage to the piazza, the 1910 piazza. And on the east elevation, we've cleaned that up. I have a pair of French doors there to the rear. Robin wants to use that back patio area on occasion for maybe some guests. If you go one more elevation, we'll look back to the north side. Number 15. There we go. So, I'm sorry, you had it back. So that's it from the rear side. It's cleaning up that. We're also stuccoing the foundation, that concrete block. I didn't mention that. There will be a fence around the rear east side of her property. I don't think my detail is exactly correct there, because that should die back into the roof at the top, where the parapet should actually die back into the roof there. It actually comes, so that's not exactly correct, but we can clean that up. The front elevation, west elevation remains as is, with the exception of the gutters. How much time do I have left?
You are out of time, Mr. Richards.
Okay, we'll leave it at that then.
Thank you, Mr. Richards. My fellow board members, do you all have any questions for Mr. Richards before we move on?
Real quick, Kim, can you jump back to the previous page?
Sure can.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the one.
Did you have a question, Bill?
I was just looking at how the intersection of, well, it's not really occurring. So we're seeing the screen wall out here. So the roof plane proper is below the eave of the existing house. Okay.
On the south side, yeah.
And it's a step in just a little bit off that corner board, it appears. Is that correct? I want to make sure I'm seeing that right.
Yeah, we'll follow the footprint of the existing structure, and that should be about right. The back wall screening is at or above the rake of the main house, but actually the roof line is a good bit below the roof line of the original house from that south elevation. So that's correct. It's well over a foot below the original roof.
Okay, thank you. And also one other very quick question of Kim. So you did get to go out, I guess it was this past week, and
A couple weeks ago.
everything was from the 70s, 80s?
Yes, as a mishmash. I think there's a lot of salvage materials. We found hinges for some of the roof sheathing, a lot of evidence of fire, There were definitely some old materials in there, but they were all salvaged. You could tell because they had different lath marks in places that obviously didn't have lath before. So yes.
It might have been the situation of a grandfathered footprint, and therefore they built above. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there was a fire and they rebuilt with what they had left.
David, I have a couple quick questions. Did you get a use variance for this to convert from
It
residential?
is commercial already.
It's already
zoned
commercial. And then so you won't do anything regarding like a ramp or accessibility anywhere?
We're struggling with that. It is several feet up, and so we're having difficulty, getting access, ADA access. We haven't been through the permitting process, but at this point in time, we're just looking at temporary ramp or something to accommodate that need. But there wouldn't be any permanent ramps or anything like that that we have incorporated so far.
Thanks.
Also, the location of the mechanical equipment, just want to make sure.
I'm sorry, I missed you. Was there a question?
The location of the mechanical equipment.
Yeah, what we have in mind to do is look. There you go. We're going to have to. The back of the property is pretty tight, and we're required to have 2 spaces there, and they need 2 spaces. So we do have the trash cans and the recycling bin there in that corner right behind the back of the building. So the mechanical is going to be on the roof here, but it should not be visible from any public right of way. I can't see how it would be, and we can provide some sightline data information on that, but it should not be visible. We've got a parapet around it, and there's just really not any angle to see it, but we can look at that more closely. And obviously I would screen it anyway, but there's just no other location to put it. We looked at Kim and I looked at it as well. There's no locations on the north elevation. Obviously we don't want to put it on the south. So really the only thing that's left is on the east side, but there's no space there. We just don't have any area. So the only space available is really up on that roof. And we think it's not going to be visible. If for some reason you can see it from some angle, which would be surprised with, we'll screen it accordingly.
Okay. Yeah, because it's a fairly low parapet. I guess that's why I ask. And you do have a view down Magazine. So a little bit of a concern if there's a screen or apparatus that needs to be added to the roof. That's obviously something that.
Yeah, it's a pretty large roof area. So we would put it on the north side of that roof as far as possible, so that you couldn't see it in either direction. But that's where we're at with that. And we haven't even got any engineering on this yet. So obviously we're going to look at try to keep that as low as possible. I mean, our ceiling heights are low, so we're trying to keep that whole thing as low as possible, so the whole addition as low as possible, so that we don't overshadow the beautiful original structure.
Any more board questions at this time? All right. We'll move on to public comment. We have a position statement from the Preservation Society of Charleston that I'll read out. It's from April 22nd, 2021. Dear board members, the Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for reaching out and walking us through this proposal. We also appreciate the opportunity to visit the site and view the existing addition, which we felt consisted primarily of modern materials and construction. Some historic materials were observed, however, seem to be salvaged and reused from other sources. We are very encouraged by this proposal to restore and bring life back to this prominent corner historic building. We find the approach to the addition to be appropriate and beneficial in cleaning up the complicated massing of the existing additions and are supportive of the project as proposed. Thank you for considering our position in this matter. Sincerely, Aaron Minigan. Kim, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We do. We have April Wood speaking.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has met with the applicant and has reviewed the request for preliminary approval for repairs, modification, and expansion of an existing rear addition. With a series of framing exposures, we believe that the applicant has adequately addressed the BAR's concerns about whether the existing rear addition is historic, and we have no objection to the removal of this portion of the building for the new addition. With regard to the windows on the addition, it appears that there are multiple versions in this application. We believe the window pattern with the divided lights and panels below is the most compatible and appropriate for this portion of the building. We are pleased to see that this early historic building will be rehabilitated and adaptively reused by a local business owner, and we respectfully recommend approval of this application. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Kim, do we have anyone else? from the
That's
public?
all.
All right. Kim, if you'll give us staff comments and recommendations.
Just a couple. It's much improved from the last time the applicant met, and we thank him for the tour and double checking the age of the addition. Just a few comments. Use a single door as previously proposed on the elevation. Recess the window plane for relief to retain the visual aspect of the original volume. We think it could go a little bit further. And then lastly, relocate the gutters to the eastern side of the main house to drain into the planting bed instead of the western side draining into the corner. And just one more comment to add a visual, vertical piece of trim on those panels underneath the windows. Let me show you where. Forgot to add it right here, just in line with this mullion. But with that, we're recommending approval. Final details to staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Richards, did you want to respond to any of the public comment or staff recommendations?
No, we're thrilled to get such positive support from all parties that have reviewed it.
All right, so let's move into board discussion and a vote.
This is Julia. I think it is looking really good, and I was glad to hear the applicant say that his intention is to make it clear that this isn't an infill of a historic two-story porch. And I had the same thought as staff about dividing that horizontal panel into two. I think that would be a subtle improvement, but I'm happy with it. Looks nice.
But this is Bill. I agree with what Julia said, and I appreciate the applicant providing the tour to staff to confirm the date of the addition. Yeah, I agree with staff's comments and recommendation. The only thing I think I would add, either as a board comment or, well, I guess it would be a board comment, that the applicant basically model the actual size of the HVAC equipment proposed to be added to the roof, and there be some form of verification of a sight line of the visibility of those items, either via mock-up on the roof for staff's approval or a sightline study. But I would think a mock-up would probably do the job adequately. And then in that instance, Kim would be leaving the screening apparatus of that mechanical equipment to your review and approval if we go with your motion, if you're okay with that.
Yep, I'm fine with that.
I just second that.
It wasn't really a motion, but yeah, well, I'll call it that. Okay, I'll make a motion for, let's see. So what are we here? I'm sorry.
Preliminary.
Bill, before you make a motion, can I make one comment?
Yeah, please, Lynn.
And I agree with everything that's been said. I think Julia's spot on, and Bill, mechanical study. I just wanted to thank the applicant for doing the investigative work. I think that's what we should be seeing from applicants when there's a question of age, and they did what we asked of them, and our city staff was able to confirm that. So that makes me very happy to know where we stand on all of that. And finally, I wanted to thank them for looking into the gate and retaining the gate. if the 1980s theory holds true, I think this is probably a Philip Simmons inspired gate, or it was perhaps made in his shop by an apprentice. I don't think the quality is quite what he would have done at the height of his career, but I think regardless, it is definitely worthy of being retained, and the latching mechanism, the way that gate is detailed. I think it may have come out of a later version, or sort of toward the later years of his shop. So that's all I have to add.
Okay. This is Bill. I'll make a motion for preliminary approval with staff's comments and a board comment that the mechanical equipment and mechanical screening device of that equipment be adequate or appropriately rendered on the plans to the true size of the equipment being used, and that a mock-up of the screening location and height be provided for staff's review and final review by staff.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval with staff comments. And I do want to interject here that Ken had mentioned a fourth board comment to add a vertical, a fourth staff comment to add a vertical piece of trim on the panels beneath the windows. Ken, is that right?
That is right.
And then a board comment. Kim, did you adequately capture Bill's board comment?
I did. Would you like me to read it?
Yes.
Preliminary approval with staff comments and board comment that the mechanical equipment and screening device be appropriately rendered on the drawings to the true size, and the mock-up of screening location, and final review by staff. How does that sound, Bill?
Okay. And the mock-up is for staff review. Okay.
For staff review, yes.
Yes. Thank you, Bill. Do we have a second to Bill's motion?
I'll second that.
Yeah. Put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
The chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Richards.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, agenda item number 5, 49 South Battery has been withdrawn. So moving on to agenda item number 6, 48 South Battery. Kim, give us an introduction.
Maybe. 48 South Battery is requesting final approval for increased height in masonry coping wall to 42 inches. The building is a category 2. It was built in 1846 and in the old historic district. Bear with me for just a minute. I'll take you on a tour. Okay, so here's the street. The house is on the north side. A little bit of a bumpy landing. Here we go. So you can see the neighbor to the east has a tall masonry fence, a wall, I should say, rather. As we drive along, there's the property on the right. And some existing conditions with this wall here. I believe this was a 2007 adjustment. Mr. Keys might be able to give a little more insight to that. With that lovely tour, if Glenn wants to take it from here, Glenn, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Could you put up the first slide, please? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. This house at 48 South Battery is in the kind of a low area on South Battery where water collects regularly during storms. As you can see, if you go to the next slide, Kim, the next, please. Next, the house is very low. The first floor is very close to grade, and as a result of that, water has come into the crawl space and into the first floor on several occasions, and the owner is ready to do some flood mitigation. As you may remember, the two houses to the east, it's been about 3 years ago, I believe, installed those masonry flood walls. This one, we would like to retain this beautiful wood fence. We think it's a very attractive, very distinctive fence and gates. And so what we're proposing to do, Kim, you go to the next slide. This is the existing conditions. Next. And you can see the height of the coping wall is 23 inches tall. What we're proposing to do, and maybe the next slide's even better, Kim, it's an enlarged elevation. We're proposing to raise the coping wall to 42 inches. So that's 19 inches higher than it is currently, and will provide 42 inches of flood protection, obviously. The gates, of course, are a concern. And so we're proposing to add wood panels on the bottom of those gates to provide, I think, an appropriate design change. And the columns would be retained, and we'd be elevating them and building a masonry base below them and creating this kind of water table at the bottom. So we think we love the fact of being able to retain this this fence, and we think it's been I think it's a reasonable solution. We have consulted with the Preservation Society and Historic Charleston Foundation, as well as the neighbors. Everyone has seemed supportive of this solution, and we would ask for your approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keys. My board members have any questions?
This is Bill. Glenn, what are you proposing to do at the gates regarding the flood control?
We'll be using the temporary flood panels that drop in the opening ahead of a storm. These are the kind that we actually use next door at 46 and 44. They're lightweight aluminum, and they are really installed very quickly. I'm very impressed with how easy they are to install. And they make them to the height you want, the width you want, so they would match that 42 inches of protection. We've seen it used in some of the previous storms on those two houses, and they work very, very well. So it is temporary. It comes and goes with the storm.
Is there any kind of a fixing of any kind of a mount system for those gates that's permanent that we would see, or is that all?
These are just compression, and we have a flat surface to work to on the wood post, and we can work to those.
Great, thank you.
I have another question. Glenn, are we indicating that that the existing coping wall is just going to somehow be sliced off and picked up? Is that what you're thinking?
I'm not. We will be a new coping wall because it will be a reinforced masonry wall to withstand the water.
Gotcha.
So it was new wall, but reusing the wood components of the fence.
Okay, thanks.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment.
We have April Wood.
Okay, and it doesn't look like we have any Preservation Society comment here. Okay, go ahead, April.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has an easement on 48 South Battery. The owners of this property have been excellent stewards of this important house. Unfortunately, they have been impacted by flooding during the 1,000-year flood and subsequent hurricanes, exacerbated by wakes caused by vehicles driving down the street during flooding events. Repairs have been costly and frustrating, but the owners have consistently been careful to protect and restore important historic features of their house. The proposed increased height for the masonry coping wall has HCF's full support. We believe that this proposal is creative and successful because it provides additional flooding protection while also retaining the historic character of the picket fence and gates. It is also differentiated from the neighboring houses who have also recently constructed masonry walls. One comment in response to Kim's earlier comment, the pedestrian gate on the west side is seen in This is Charleston book dated 1941. I don't know about the specific materials, but a gate was there that looked like the current one. We respectfully recommend approval of this application. Thank you.
Thanks, April. Kim, do we have anyone else speaking from the public?
No, we don't.
All right, well, let's move on to staff comments and recommendations.
Thank you. We applaud the applicant and the architect for the creative solution for maintaining the historic elements and character defining fence while taking protective measures to protect the integrity of the historic building. The staff's recommending conceptual approval with final review by staff. Any other elements to detail?
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Keith, if you want to respond to any of the comments from Historic Charleston or staff comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Let's move on to board discussion and a vote. Who wants to kick us off?
Start. I think, for better or worse, the approval of those new walls at the two adjacent houses sort of opened the proverbial floodgates for this kind of thing. Sorry about that. But I do appreciate that in this case, the old wood elements are retained, whereas I think at the neighboring houses, those beautiful panels are lost to us forever. So I have no problem with this.
Fillmore Wilson here. I still contend that in the long haul, this is not the way to deal with sea level rise and increased nuisance flooding. And even though the masonry walls to the adjacent house is a very appropriately designed wall for Charleston, it really is not appropriate for this streetscape. And I went down there today and drove down the street and looked at all this again, and it's clearly an anomaly in this area, in this part of South Battery. And as I said, even though it's clearly a very appropriate design for Charleston, and I supported that when it came along because of the nuisance flooding. Every time I drive by it, I have this twinge of regret. And in a way, even though the current proposal is much more sensitive, and I understand, the sort of overwhelming desire to try to do something about the increased flooding, I struggle because I think this is not the long-term appropriate way to deal with this. But this is clearly a sensitive approach, and I understand it, and therefore, once again, I am reluctantly leaning towards supporting it.
Glenn Gardner. I have a lot of the same feelings of Fillmore just across the board. And every time I drive down the street, I do miss the fences that are now gone. But at the same time, I am completely able to comprehend the reason they're gone. And I think in this application, the transparency of maintaining the wood fence above is extremely helpful. I think the wood fence does become pretty darn tall, but I also, I think I'm in support of the way they're trying to do this without altering the wood that was there, aside from adding on the panels on the gates. So it is a bit of a precarious situation, and you know, this does not solve the problem for the city, but I respect the endeavor of homeowners to try to protect their property. So I sort of lean in that direction on this, as we ended up kind of leaning with the neighboring properties in the past.
Yeah, this is Bill. I agree with the comments that were made, and I agree with the staff's comments and recommendation. And Glenn, to your point, it is, you know, a measure that a homeowner can take. And again, now we're looking at elevating homes on top of everything else. So I would go ahead and make a motion for. Is this for final, by the way? Or is this
Final.
make a motion for final approval? And it was a final.
The staff recommendation was conceptual approval.
That was a mistake. I am recommending final.
Got it. Apologies, Bill. I did not mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. That's why I asked. So I'll make a motion for final approval. And if there is a final review by staff, I'll put it in there.
All right. We have a motion on the floor by Bill for final approval with final review by staff. Do I have a second?
Second, Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn. Let's put it to a vote. Julia?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Steve.
Thank you.
We're just gonna make him submit it one more time just for fun.
Your purview, Kim.
Moving to agenda item number 7. Well, 7, since Alvadra's Wharf has been withdrawn. Agenda item number 8, 1108 King Street has been withdrawn. And now we are on the 9th and final agenda item, 250 Rutledge Avenue. Kim?
Thank you. Let me just check Mr. Stevenson in here. And Ms. Stoney. Go. 250 Rutledge Avenue is requesting conceptual approval for a rear addition to the existing duplex. The building's a category 4 in the Canterbury-Elliottboro neighborhood. It's constructed in 1895 and in the Old City District. Here's an aerial just to familiarize yourself with the property, just north of Bogard. And some existing site photos. You remember this building was moved from Harm's Way, where the crosstown cut through, and relocated in this location. You can see the piazzas in the wrong place. It should be on the south side. Some historic images. There's the 1902 and the 1944 Sanborn maps showing vacant parcel. And then there's a newspaper article from 1966 saying the Board of Adjustment will be considering to relocation of the building from 505, 510 Rutledge. And here it is on Rutledge Avenue in the Sanborn maps from 1921 and 1944. And here it is in location. That's all the history I have. Previous motion was for denial for height, scale, and mass and general architectural direction. And if Mr. Stevenson or Ms. Stoney wants to take it from here, you have the floor whenever you're ready.
Okay, this is Neil. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Great. All right, well, thank you. Again, you've all seen this before. Our client would like us to build an addition, and of course, space is tight. So we, and this house, unfortunately, this house is just so low. It's been a struggle for us. So in our last meeting, we listened to what everyone said and, really agreed with all of it. So we've done a number of things to address the issues. One of them was to just reduce the size of it overall. We lowered the ridge of the building so that it's a little bit lower than the main house, so that it has that hierarchy. I know it's just like scraping for inches here, but we removed the dormer on the south side so that it doesn't jump out at you, because it kind of did from Rutledge and from Bogard, frankly. Another thing we discussed, and you see this elevation that on the north elevation didn't change so much, but it's really except that we did increase the hyphen about 8 inches, just to make it a little more noticeable. And then really just tried to we added some windows on the south side just to help make that view from Bogard Street a little more interesting and to get some light into the building. Overall, I think it helped the project. And we matched the siding so that there's horizontal siding, trying to keep it so that it talks a little bit more to the front building. I think we were trying to deviate a little too far, but overall, not a huge number of tweaks, but I think that what we did addressed some of the situation that people were concerned about. So,
Is that
any
all?
questions?
Any board questions at this time?
Yeah. Kim, is there a site plan that shows just the mechanical equipment again? Just curious to know about that mechanical equipment location.
It's right. The proposed location's right here.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. There is a position statement from the Preservation Society stated April 22nd, 2021. Dear board members, the Preservation Society appreciates the applicant for reaching out to us on this request and responding to our feedback. This proposal is moving in the right direction. However, we are concerned with the blank opening at the garage entry on the north elevation and feel it is inappropriate to create a condition in which parked cars are not screened. We encourage the applicant to study the custom folding doors to mitigate this visibility issue. Thank you for considering our position in this matter. Sincerely, Erin Minigan. Kim, do we have anyone else speaking?
We have Miss April Wood from Historic Charleston Foundation.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. We also appreciate the applicant reaching out with revised drawings, and we have the same comments that the Preservation Society does about that garage opening. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Kim, is that all for public comment?
It is.
All right, if you will give us the city staff comments and recommendations.
Yeah, the current proposal is much improved. We still feel that the open garage space is concerning and should employ a garage door. The staff's recommending conceptual approval with staff comments noted and final review by staff.
Thank you, Kim. Mr. Stevenson, did you want to respond to any of the comments from the Preservation Society or Historic Charleston or any of the city staff comments?
Yes, actually, and in regards to the garage doors, actually with Kim's help, we have been able to find actually several companies that do a vertical rolling door that I think could work. We hadn't figured out all the details, but that the intention would be to put those in, and if that's a condition, we're happy to abide by it.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Let's move on to board discussion and a vote.
Yeah, this is Bill. I'll go ahead and jump in. I agree with the with staff's comments and recommendation. I guess regarding those doors, potential garage doors, that one bay is fairly shallow. It's more if a larger vehicle wouldn't be able to fit into a enclosed garage in that space. But that, I'm sure that's just something that the owner will have to have somebody buy a smart car or something like that. But I do agree with the comments forwarded by staff and the recommendation.
I have nothing to add. I think sounds like
Likewise.
Kim has done what he needed. So why don't I just vote a motion for conceptual approval with staff comments noted and final review by staff.
Thank you, Julia. We have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with staff comments noted and final review by staff. Do I have a second?
I'll second. It's Bill.
Thank you, Bill. Let's put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
Chair votes with a majority and the motion passes unanimously. And that completes our agenda for this evening.
Thank you, y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Madam Chairman.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.